go ahead and get started. Today I'm working on this Treelord Ancient again from Age of Sigmar. And today I'm going to do all the little finicky details that I didn't have time to get to on the previous stream that I worked on him. So he's got a bunch of like little fungus or something growing on him. He's got some jewelry in a couple places, an owl, some mushrooms, some details in his beard, a couple things like that, just to make him a little more interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and start with those mushrooms that I talked about. I'm going to use Mephiston Red to start off. I'm going to make these the classic fantasy mushrooms, the red mushrooms with white dots on them. Just for fun, basically. Don't think they could be realistic. I'm sure there could be a mushroom that actually looks like that with the amount of different varieties that exist, but these are sort of the classic mushrooms you see in fairy tales and fantasy things, so I figured why not. I think they only exist on this arm, but I just want to make sure that they don't exist anywhere else so that I don't miss them. Okay. Alrighty, so there they have their red on them. I'll come back. Now I'm just going to take some Pallid Witch Flesh, which is basically white, but just slightly off-white, so it'll look a little more natural. Just going to take my thin brush here. If I can get it to come to a point. There we go. And then I'm just going to put some dots on the mushrooms, kind of haphazardly. There we go. Just trying to make them as random as possible. They're a tiny detail, so they're not super important. Alrighty, so there we go. We've got our dots on our mushrooms there. If it wants to focus on them. There we go. Dots on mushrooms. So then I'm going to go through and I'm going to pick out all the lichen and stuff that's on him. At least that's what I think this stuff is. Looks sort of like barnacles almost. I'm going to go through with... What color am I going to do? I think I'm going to do this Volupus pink color. It's a contrast paint that it's pretty pink, but also leans sort of towards red. So sort of will have the same, be in the same family as the mushrooms, but not be the exact same color. And some of these, it's hard to tell if it's actually supposed to be this stuff or if it's just like roots or something that are part of his armor, but I'm just sort of estimating where it should be. And if it's, you know, if I accidentally paint a detail that wasn't quote unquote meant to be that, then it's not the end of the world. Couple more down here. I think that might be all of them except for his right arm. He has a big old knot of them up here. Not sure if it's supposed to be wood or these barnacle looking things or not, but I'm going to paint them like it. At the very least, it'll just break up all this white wood that we have up here anyway, so not a problem. Alright, so there's that. Oh, he's got just a little spot of it down here and down there. Alright, I think that I've got it all. It appears like I have. So then I'm going to go through and use this Steel Legion drab, and I'm just going to highlight all the places that we left the darker wood. I'm going to highlight that by doing some overbrushing. So like dry brushing, you wipe almost all the paint off your brush. Overbrushing is similar, but you keep more paint on your brush. I think on the last stream someone in the chat called it wet brushing, I think, or moist brushing. That's basically the idea. So everywhere we left the darker wood, I'm just going over it to catch the raised areas. Basically like we did with the white here, but we're leaving more paint on the brush because we can't really, if you remember, if you watched the first episode, we were very rough with how we applied the white. We were going back and forth really quickly, and you can't really do that on these indented areas like this. So you have to leave a little bit more paint on the brush and just be gentle. Because if we start going like how we put the white on, we'll just get this brown all over the white, and that'll defeat the whole purpose. So just have to go a little slower. And it doesn't have to be perfectly accurate on all of the bits with this, with the darker wood. I'm using it to cover up any spots where the white got in there a little too much. And then just to break up the darkness a little bit. But it's not like it has to be on every single raised edge of this darker wood. So if you can see in there, I just got it on the raised bits of that, but left the dark down in the middle. I'm going to do this all over his beard also. And on these tendrils, there's a little bit of white left over, so I'm just going to get rid of that. Same thing on these. Just being careful not to hit our mushrooms we just painted. I'm going to do his head last, so I'll just go over and do all these. Get the back of his head, possibly his hair. Alright, and then I'm just going to come down and do his beard. And his mouth down here. We are going to come back and paint these leaves in his beard, but we'll do that in a minute. First, we want to get this second tone on the beard. Alright, there we go. And that, oh, let me get the back of the beard. Should be a good idea. There we go. And you can be a little bit rougher when you're doing something like this. You can get a lot more paint on the underside or the backside of things, because it will always naturally be in shadow. And so you need to be able to see the contrast. There needs to be a bigger difference in the contrast, so more of this lighter color will help that show. Something to keep in mind if you're painting something like this and you need the undersides to keep the same visual look as the rest of your model. Alright, so now I'm going to go through. I'm going to work on his staff a little bit. He's got like these. He's got spots in his staff here that are like the underneath wood is showing through. And because he's casting spells with this staff, I'd like it to look like some sort of magical energy almost is coming out of there. And he's already very green, and so I'm going to go with a blue magic that's coming out of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the Pallid Witch Flesh again. I can't remember if this is the color we used on the wood or not. It might have been. But I'm going to take this and I'm going to fill in all these in-between spots where the underneath wood is showing. I'm going to fill them in completely, and then I'm going to come back around them and just stipple on a little bit of this white. And he's got there's some cracks running down here, so I'm going to paint those as well. And if a little bit gets over onto the brown, that's fine, because we want to get this sort of cheap glow effect without having to spend a lot of time on it. It's not going to look amazing, but you'll be able to tell it's supposed to be glowing, and it'll only be 2 steps, so can't really ask for more. Just got some more here. And then I'm just going to sort of take some creative liberty here and just kind of put some white up here in some random spots, which will take that glow that we're going to do in a second pretty well here. And I was going to paint, I think I won't do that. Anywhere else? Nope. So I'm just going to do the other side now. Make sure to get these cracks in the wood. Okay, that looks good. And then we'll put some up here. Not being that careful with this up here, just kind of putting it in places. That looks good. Oh, I put some up in here on the other side, so I'll do that as well. It looks rough right now, but hopefully we'll fix that up in a minute with the glow we're going to use. So I'm just going to let that part dry for a second. I'm going to come in with the Retributer Armor, my go-to gold color. And you just got a couple bits of what look like metal, so I'm just going to paint those real quick. So he's got this gem down here. And then he's got this thing, which could be wood, but I'm going to say it's metal. It's holding his beard. Could be stone, could be wood, could be a lot of things, but I'm going to say it's metal on my tree man. Alright, then I'm just going to double check. I think those are the only two instances of stuff that we're going to call metal. Yep. Yep, that's it. Alright, cool. So then, just going to look at the white paint we put on the staff here. Looks to be dry enough. Maybe not quite yet. So I'm going to come in and do the leaves on his beard here. I'm going to use... We used dark purple for these leaves, which I now can't find. Interesting. Oh, here it is. We use this dark purple on the leaves that are on his body. I'm going to use this light purple to do the leaves on his beard. Just so they sort of look like they connect to each other, but they're not identical. Just a couple more of those, and then as soon as we do this, make sure there are none on the back sides. As soon as we do this, our white should be dry enough, and so we'll go back with our glow paint. There we go. I actually realized I need to put this white one more place because of how I want to do this. So I'm going to put white inside his mouth here. And I forgot we actually need to go back and do our stippling, so that's fine. So I'm going to take a pretty beat up brush, and similar to dry brushing, I'm going to get about the same amount of paint off the brush. And then I'm just going to come into where we put the white, and I'm just going to poke the brush into the areas around this white, like this, and up here. Extend it up these tentacles, why not? Put it here. Alright, and then the same thing on the other side. Like that. And then I'm going to do it just lightly around his mouth area. Like that. Alright. And then I'm going to take some, if I can find it, some Aethermatic Blue, which is the light blue contrast paint. Right there, Aethermatic Blue. And I'm just going to paint over all that white that we first painted on and then stippled on. I'm going to do it relatively thinly, not... You can lump contrast paint on there and it'll give you a different effect, obviously, but I'm going to do it pretty thin. So I'm just going to paint over like this. So this is going to cover over the white and give us a sort of glowing effect, because it will cover the white completely, but it will not cover the brown of the staff. Just sort of make all the white covered here. And so some can get where we haven't put white, because it'll just mostly blend in with the wood. The brown will show through. But in the places that we have the bright white down, that will turn blue. And hopefully look like a glowing staff about to shoot some magic at you or something. You just want to make sure that all your white actually changes to blue. You don't want any white remaining. So go down here. All right. So there we have our staff, if it wants to focus, that has some energy coursing through it, ready to zap some unruly enemies of the Wood Elves. Just give my paint a shake, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the mouth. I put the paint in the mouth a little bit wetter. I didn't dry my brush off as much, so that when we put this blue in, you'll see it's going to mix with that white paint and give us more of a total coverage of the inside of his mouth, as opposed to this sort of just layered effect, I guess you'd say. So that the inside of his mouth will look blue, and the outside of around it will look like it's glowing. So if you can see that in there, his inside of his mouth is pretty dark, so you can't really see it, but basically by leaving the white paint wet, it mixes with the blue and makes sort of a light blue paint as opposed to a contrast paint. And then the stippling around the mouth with the texture, or with the contrast paint over it, will give us that glow. So that's what we did. So then I'm going to go through and do the same thing that we did with the wood. How we dry brushed it with a lighter. I'm going to take this Gauss Blaster green, which is very, very bright, but I'm going to get most of the paint off my brush for this, so there's going to be a very light dry brush. And I'm just going to come through on the green parts of these tendrils here and just get a little bit of something on them. This will almost appear white on these, but because we started with a green paint, it'll look better on these green leaves. Just gonna do that everywhere that there's some greenery. Notably not the glowing runes on his skin, but all the branches on him and stuff. We're gonna do that. You don't really have to hit them all. You hit some, and then they'll start to look different from each other, and that's really good enough, just to mix it up a little bit. So that's looking pretty good. Still don't like how not green our branches are over here. Our tendrils on the staff are. So I'm just going to take some of the insane green, the Warp Lightning contrast, and just put a little bit of it on these things. They're not really reading as green to me. I think partially because they're sitting next to that blue. Just going to put a little bit of this, and this will also go over the dry brush we just did, and help that read a little bit more green also. That's better. And so then I'm going to put some of this on the tendrils also, but I can't put it directly over the blue because it will overpower the blue. So I'm just going to put it on the tips of these, just to give something of the green on here. That's better. Alrighty. I think I'm just going to put a tiny little bit of this, using it almost like real paint as opposed to contrast paint, on the tendrils that are holding the leaves on his beard here. Just like that. There we go. Alrighty. What else do we have here? Oh, we've got the owl. Forgot about the owl sitting there. So I'm going to use some Gorgrunta fur. It's a paint I enjoy. Oh, we also have his loincloth thing here that we're going to use. Spill some Gorgrunter on my hand. Excellent. So I'm just going to coat the owl in this. I'm not sure what type of owl he is exactly. He's a Sylvaneth owl. There. Solved that problem. I have it on good authority that Sylvaneth owls are Gorthor, or not Gorthor brown, are Gorgrunta brown. So we'll let that dry and then we'll highlight him a little bit. But now I'm going to go to the loincloth here, and I picked my colors out for this. So I'm using Trollslayer Orange and Fire Dragon Bright. I'm going to put this on first, and then go to this. So I'll start with the Trollslayer Orange. And I originally thought I was going to draw in each one of these lines, but then I thought that the viewers and I might both go brain dead watching and doing that. So I'm just going to dry brush. I'm going to try to get this first layer sort of like an overbrush, but this paint is kind of thin, so that can be difficult. So I might mess it up. We'll see. So I'm using my brush like I would during a edge highlight, basically. Putting it on its side. And I'm just running the brush down. This is just really, this doesn't have to do a lot itself. It's just a setup for the next layer, which is the Fire Dragon Bright. So I'm going to do that right now. Fire Dragon Bright. So again, I'm going to get most of the paint off the brush. And I'm going to start with the edges here. And just see if we can get these to change in tone just a little bit. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. But that, I think, it still definitely reads as red, but the orange brings it into the more natural you might see in a forest red, as well as just giving it some nice highlights. So I think that works for us. So then, what shall we do next? I think I'm gonna add some Ironbreaker to the gem on hanging from his belt. There we go. That'll work for that. And then, what else do we have? Our blue is still drying. We don't really need to touch that at all. Actually, I'm gonna go back to this blue, Aethermatic blue, and I'm gonna put some on the claw in his other hand. This is already mostly white wood, so we don't have to worry about stippling the white back on. Just gonna put some in his palm here, and then sort of work tendrils of this blue up his fingers here. Like that. So then he's got some of that glow in that hand also. There's a stray dot of it there. I think I'll put the glow on the tips of his fingernails here, or his claw, or whatever it is. Just a hint towards that glow in his hands. There we go. Alrighty, then I'm just gonna do some quick dots for. I'm gonna use some Black Templar. Do some quick dots in the owl's eyes with this. There we go. Y'all can see now. And then I think I'm just going to take some of this black and just do a couple little line highlights or shades here, just to put some more depth in the beard. Just in a couple places. And then I'm going to do them in the braids of the beard here. And some of those lines will look a little thick right now, but once the paint starts to dry, a lot of that will go away. Then I'm just going to put some lines in between the armor panels and what we were calling the skin, just to give it some more definition. Some of these you don't really need it, but just for some added highlight, couldn't hurt. There's a couple places here. Like down here, you don't really need it. The depth is doing all you need, but up here where the depth sort of goes away, we'll put some in. Let's see. That's probably fine. That looks good. Alrighty. So we might be almost done here. I'm going to take some Treelord sand. Nope, Xandri dust. And highlight the owl. Just the tips of his ears, his beak, and then the feathers on his cheeks, basically. And then maybe the little edges of his wings, like that. And then the lines of his feathers back here. And then the back of his ears also to match the front. There we go. Alrighty. And then he's got a couple instances of like what looks like rope here. I'm just going to touch them with a little highlight of this just to break them up. Not even going to fully paint the whole thing, just touching the tops of these like that. Alright. And then I think we're done. Nope, not quite done. I'm going to take some Fulgrim Pink, and that same method earlier of the stippling. I'm just going to take some of this, get most of it off. Get most of it off the brush. And then all the little lichen we did earlier, I'm just going to come in and tap this very lightly into it, just to break up the color. Give it a more mossy appearance. That's good. I think I might tap just a tiny bit of this onto some of these leaves down here. These are the purple leaves from last time. Just to break them up a little bit. Like I said, with the with the other ones. We don't have to hit all of them. Just hit some of them to break them up a little bit. There we go. Alrighty, and I think that's going to do it for this guy. Aside from the base, obviously. The base is going to be next Friday. I'm going to do a pretty complicated base, at least I think. There's going to be a stream or maybe a pond on a corner of this, and then some rocks, and then just some basic tufts and stuff. The complicated part is the resin, so it'll take a little bit of time, but that's okay. But besides his base, I think he is done. Just taking a look around, making sure there isn't anything else I want to add. Looking at him on camera also, compared to in real life. And there is something I want to add. I'm going to take some of this Rakarth flesh, and I'm going to dry brush his beard and horns with this. Or beard and not horns. Beard and the braid part of his beard. I guess it's both his beard. This is reading just a little too dark to me and not looking that good. So I'm going to get most of this paint off my brush and just come in and dry brush right there. I think that works out better. It's still brown, so it won't blend into the background too much. But yeah, I like that more. Oh, I have the last thing to do. I have this gem sitting down here on his waist, and I'm going to use this Blood for the Blood God paint. It dries shiny because it's meant to simulate fake blood, and so putting it on this gem will preserve the shininess from the silver, as well as add its own shininess, so that it will actually look like a shining, reflecting gem on him. There we go. And then I just looked, and I have one last thing to do. This is going to be the next 45 minutes of me realizing I have more to do. Going to take some Guilliman flesh, and I'm just going to put it on this gold here, enrichen that gold. That looks good. I'm just wiping the very top of it off to give that gold some shine right at the top. I think I'm going to put a little bit of this on this loincloth also. It'll separate the orange and the red just a little bit. Give it a little bit more pop. I'm not sure you'll be able to see that on stream, but in person and hopefully in the pictures it will show up as a difference. So it's a very light paint, but I think it brings out the red, or the orange from the red more. So that's good. That's what we wanted. And I think for real this time, that is it. So we did the mushrooms, we did the owl, we did the loincloth more, we did the glow on his staff, on his face, and on his hand over here. We did the lichen, the gold, worked on his beard a little bit, and then dry brushed a couple things. And yeah, so I think once he gets stuck on a base, I think he'll be all ready, set to go. I'll be back next week. Monday doing something 40k related. Wednesday something beginner board game Dungeons and Dragons related. Something like that, in that theme. And then Friday, I'll be back here with him and his base. Thank you everybody for watching, and I will see you next time.